Have you ever truly experienced something out there in the world? I know, it sounds like a strange way to begin. Almost philosophical for no reason. But stay with me for a moment. Because what I really want to explore with you is this simple but profound question: what is it that we actually experience when we say we experience the world? You might say, of course I experience the world. I see it, I hear it, I interact with it every single day. And yes, that feels undeniably true. There's this sense of other people, objects, sounds, events happening somewhere outside of us. It feels obvious. But let's slow this down, let's gently peel back the layers. Right now, for example, you're watching this video. You see my face on a screen, maybe it's your phone, your laptop, your tablet. You hear my voice speaking to you. It feels direct, immediate, almost personal. But what's actually happening? Somewhere else, I'm sitting in front of a camera and a microphone. Light reflects off my face, enters a lens, gets converted into digital data. My voice becomes electrical signals. That data travels across networks, through cables, across invisible waves, and finally arrives at your device. Your screen rearranges tiny pixels to form what looks like me. Your speakers vibrate the air to recreate what sounds like my voice. And then something even more fascinating happens. Those vibrations reach your ears. The light from the screen reaches your eyes. Your nervous system picks up these signals, these tiny pulses of information, and sends them to your brain. And your brain, in its extraordinary way, translates all of that into meaning. So what are you really experiencing right now? Not my voice directly, not me directly, not even the screen directly. You're experiencing your brain's interpretation of signals. In a very real sense, what you call my voice is something being constructed inside your own awareness. It's your nervous system translating patterns into sound, into language, into meaning. And while I am influencing what you interpret, I am speaking, I am expressing, the final experience is happening entirely within you. It's intimate, it's personal, it's closer than we usually realize. And when we begin to notice this, something shifts. The boundary between out there and in here becomes less solid. The world we thought we were directly touching starts to look more like a beautifully orchestrated dance of energy, information, and interpretation. And that's where things start to get really interesting. In a way, it is more of a co-creation. Because you never truly experience me or my message in a pure, untouched form. Everything you hear is filtered through your conditioning, your past experiences, your beliefs, the mental framework you use to make sense of life. The way you compare, categorize, and relate to what is being said shapes the meaning you extract from it. And this does not just apply to this video. It applies to every single moment of your day. You are never directly experiencing the world or other people as they are in themselves. You are interpreting what appears as the world, you are interpreting what appears as others. In that sense, what you are truly experiencing is your own perception, your own inner activity. Yes, there seems to be influence from outside sources. There are conversations, events, circumstances that affect you. But in the end, it is you who determines what something means. It is you who decides, consciously or unconsciously, how something is experienced. This is why I asked whether you have ever truly experienced an outer world. Because what feels like a world out there may actually be a projection of a landscape within you. And this is the central idea I want to explore here. What if life is not primarily an outer battle, but an inner game? If that is true, then what is the purpose of this game? Is there growth, progression, evolution? And where is it all leading? I am not claiming to have absolute answer, I am not offering a final truth. Take what resonates with you and simply leave the rest. When we think about games, We usually think in terms of winning and losing, competition, reaching an end goal, overcoming obstacles, defeating opponents, achieving victory. Depending on the level from which you are operating, life can certainly look this way. In fact, many people today seem to view existence through this lens. I call this level 0. Level 0 is the level of survival. Its primary objective is simple: survive as successfully as possible, accumulate more resources, earn more money, collect more experiences, maximize pleasure, gather status, possessions, recognition. At this level, life becomes about achieving, acquiring, proving. It follows the familiar storyline of survival of the fittest. But if we are honest, that model may be outdated. It reduces life to competition and constant comparison, as if existence were nothing more than a struggle to outdo one another. And perhaps that is only the very beginning of the game. The challenge with level 0 is subtle but powerful. At that stage, the symbols of the world become everything: money, status, appearance, achievements, recognition. These symbols are given meaning, and then they become the measuring stick for our self-worth. And this is where the flaw begins to show. Why are we so focused on survival in the first place? Because, at a deep level, we believe we are separate from one another, separate from the world, separate from life itself. From that sense of separation comes the assumption that resources are scarce, that safety is fragile, that security depends entirely on what we can produce and protect. If everything is limited, then survival seems like the only logical priority. So we strive, we achieve, we accumulate, we guard what we have. Beneath it all, there is a quiet fear that it could disappear, that we could lose it, that one day we may not be able to perform, produce, or compete in the same way. And if that happens, who would we be? This underlying fear keeps the nervous system on alert. It fuels the constant push for more. Interestingly, when you look at many well-known and highly successful individuals, you often find that external success does not guarantee inner fulfillment. Some of the people who have accumulated the most symbols of success still struggle with a deep sense of dissatisfaction or unrest. When we outsource our sense of self to things that are temporary and inherently neutral, we become dependent on maintaining them. Our well-being becomes tied to circumstances we cannot ultimately control. And sooner or later, most of us begin to sense that something about this approach does not quite work. That realization is the beginning of a shift. It is the movement into what I would call level 1. Level 1 is centered on the self, but in a very different way. It is no longer about collecting symbols or proving worth. It is about growth for its own sake. It is about becoming rather than acquiring. You might call it personal development, you might call it inner work, you might even call it a kind of soul evolution. The focus is on learning, expanding, experimenting, creating, failing, adjusting, and trying again. The value is found in the process itself. At this level, life starts to feel less like a competition and more like an exploration. Level 1 is about expansion. While it was almost impossible at level 0 to feel any real sense of purpose beyond survival, here something new begins to emerge. You start to sense that you are here for more than just getting by. You begin to feel drawn towards certain paths, certain expressions, certain passions. There is a spark of individuality that becomes clearer. Through different experiences and challenges, you slowly discover who you are beyond the narrow definitions you once accepted. The identities that felt fixed begin to loosen, the boxes you placed yourself in start to open. And in that opening, you catch glimpses of something deeper, something more authentic, something that feels like you, not as a role or a status, but as a living, evolving presence. That is the journey of level 1. As we continue through level 1, something beautiful begins to unfold. We start unlocking our abilities, skills that were dormant begin to surface, natural gifts reveal themselves. At the same time, we consciously cultivate qualities that feel deeper than achievement. Qualities like love, kindness, compassion, patience, and wisdom. Our intellect also expands, but not in a rigid or purely analytical way. It stretches beyond the narrow frame of survival thinking. We begin to sense perspectives that are wider, more inclusive, more spacious. Life no longer feels like a battlefield, it starts to feel like a field of possibility. This is often the stage where we experience something beyond our individual identity, a connection to something greater, a glimpse of the sublime, a sense that there is a deeper intelligence or harmony moving through everything. And that is what opens the door to Level 2. Level 2 is centered around service. It continues the expansion, learning, and growth of Level 1, but now the focus shifts. Growth is no longer only for personal fulfillment, it becomes something we offer. What we learn, what we practice, what we embody is shared for the benefit of others. Our development becomes relational. Instead of asking, "How can I improve myself?" we begin asking, "How can what I am becoming serve the whole?" At this level, we start to sense our calling more clearly, not just a career or a role, but a deeper purpose. There is a unique way in which each of us can contribute. And when we begin to step into that contribution, we experience a kind of fulfillment that achievement alone could never provide. Level 2 is marked by compassion and generosity. It is characterized by openness, by the willingness to show up, to support, to collaborate. The vision expands from personal growth to collective well-being. We care about humanity, we care about the world. And as we move deeper into this stage, something profound becomes obvious. The separation that defined Level 0 begins to dissolve. What once felt like a solid boundary between me and others starts to appear more like a mental construction. We realize that the sense of separateness was, in many ways, a protective mechanism. A strategy of the ego designed to create safety and control. But as awareness grows, that rigid identity softens. We begin to see that life reflects our inner state, the world mirrors our consciousness, our relationships, our challenges, our experiences all seem to echo something within us. Through presence and awareness, we cultivate sensitivity to this inner landscape. And as that awareness deepens, even the sense of we evolves. It is no longer just about cooperation between separate individuals, there is a felt sense of unity, a recognition that we are expressions of the same life. With that recognition comes a natural sense of responsibility. Not obligation rooted in fear, but a sincere desire to contribute, to participate, to help create a world that reflects clarity, compassion, and harmony. There is a feeling of being part of a team, a family, a shared unfolding. And because the world is experienced as a mirror of our own consciousness, improving the world and refining ourselves are no longer separate tasks. They are one movement. As we deepen into this understanding, something else begins to soften. The idea that I must go out and fix the world starts to lose its urgency, the pressure to achieve something extraordinary, to mold reality into a particular shape, begins to dissolve. Even the assumption that there is something solid out there that I can control in a permanent way starts to fall apart. This is where the well-known words of Mahatma Gandhi resonate so deeply: be the change. Of course, there are meaningful actions we can take. We can support, build, create, contribute. But ultimately, everything returns to being. The quality of your presence has a greater impact than any single action. Your state of consciousness influences your life, your relationships, and the wider field around you in ways that are often invisible yet profound. Doing becomes an expression of being. When being is clear, grounded, and aligned, action flows naturally from it. There is less strain, less forcing, less anxiety about outcomes. Action becomes a byproduct of presence rather than a desperate attempt to secure identity or control. As one rests more deeply in this presence, the doorway to what we might call level 3 begins to open. Level 3 is difficult to describe because it exists beyond the framework of concepts. Words can point toward it, but they cannot contain it. In this space, even ideas such as growth, purpose, and unity begin to feel limited. It is not dual, it is not even one in the way we usually think of oneness, because oneness still implies the possibility of two-ness. Here, there is no center and no edge, no inner and no outer, no separate self that can claim ownership of experience. The presence that remains is not something you possess, it is what you are. If we continue using the language of the game, level 3 is about spirit, and something truly remarkable happens here. At level 3, we start to recognize that the purpose of the game was always the same. From the very beginning, the deeper impulse has been to seek alignment with the spirit that we truly are. Yet that purpose has been interpreted differently at each stage. At level 0, the longing for spirit is filtered through separation. It becomes survival. The deeper drive to reconnect with our true nature is misunderstood as the need to protect, defend, and secure a fragile identity. It feels as though I must survive at all costs, because there is such a profound disconnection from the spirit beneath the surface. As we move through the levels, that connection gradually strengthens. Through growth, service, and presence, we begin to sense something stable and eternal within us. The distance between who we think we are and what we truly are becomes smaller and smaller. Eventually, even that subtle sense of separation dissolves. What remains is not an individual trying to reach spirit, but spirit recognizing itself. In my own life, I have had glimpses of this, moments of clarity, moments where the boundaries soften and something vast and peaceful reveals itself. I can only speak from my experience, and even that experience is limited. So take this not as a final statement, but as a personal reflection on this stage of the journey. I deeply feel that at the core of every human being there is an impulse for something beyond the surface of the world. A quiet yearning that cannot be satisfied by achievement, status, or even everything cultivated in the earlier stages. All the skills, wisdom, compassion, and understanding, begins to integrate into a kind of effortless flow. There is mastery, but not the tense mastery of control. It is more like surfing a wave. When you are learning to surf, you fight the water, you try to dominate it. But once you understand its rhythm, you no longer battle the ocean, you move with it. In level 3, life itself becomes the wave. Instead of acting from personal will alone, there is a sense of being moved by a greater current. Some may call it the will of life, others may call it the source, or the universe. The label does not matter. What matters is the felt sense that existence is unfolding through you. Not just because of you. There is immense power in this, but it is a quiet power. A power rooted in surrender rather than control. It carries the hallmark of non-doing, not passivity, but alignment. You become an instrument rather than the sole composer. If we relate this to a simple learning model, we could say that level 0 is unconsciously incompetent. Level 1 is consciously incompetent, aware of how much there is to learn. Level 2 becomes consciously competent, skillful and intentional. And level 3 is unconsciously competent. At that point, your capacities are so integrated that they no longer require constant thought. There is no strain, no overanalysis, no mental rehearsal. Action arises spontaneously, appropriately, effortlessly. It is only in the quieting of the compulsive mind, in the softening of the separate self, that this kind of flow becomes possible. And what remains is not someone trying to win the game, but life playing itself freely, fully, and without resistance. Beyond thought, beyond constant analysis, something extraordinary becomes possible. A person begins to function less as an isolated individual and more as an instrument of the divine. And in that alignment, true self-mastery emerges. At level 3, we start to recognize that the purpose of the game was always the same. From the very beginning, the deeper impulse has been to seek alignment with the spirit that we truly are. Yet that purpose has been interpreted differently at each stage. At level 0, the longing for spirit is filtered through separation. It becomes survival. The deeper drive to reconnect with our true nature is misunderstood as the need to protect, defend, and secure a fragile identity. It feels as though I must survive at all costs, because there is such a profound disconnection from the spirit beneath the surface. As we move through the levels, that connection gradually strengthens. Through growth, service, and presence, we begin to sense something stable and eternal within us. The distance between who we think we are and what we truly are becomes smaller and smaller. Eventually, even that subtle sense of separation dissolves. What remains is not an individual trying to reach spirit, but spirit recognizing itself. In my own life, I have had glimpses of this, moments of clarity, moments where the boundaries soften and something vast and peaceful reveals itself. I can only speak from my experience, and even that experience is limited. So take this not as a final statement, but as a personal reflection on this stage of the journey. I deeply feel that at the core of every human being there is an impulse for something beyond the surface of the world. A quiet yearning that cannot be satisfied by achievement, status, or even service alone. It is the longing to remember who we truly are beneath the layers of conditioning and identity. To remember the true self. And that true self is not small. It is not confined. It carries an infinite sense of possibility and freedom. When it is recognized, even briefly, the peace that arises is unlike anything the external world can provide. The joy is not dependent on circumstance, the fulfillment is not fragile, it is profound, it is steady. It feels like coming home. And that is why I believe that, above all else, the deepest purpose of this life is the realization of our true nature. Everything else, every level of the game, every challenge and triumph, seems to point us back toward that simple and beautiful recognition. If this resonated and you want to go deeper, I created a free self-inquiry worksheet. Write in comments, self-inquiry, I will send you more details.